Hi everyone, I'm Adrian, Philip, Jay. We're from Audio Excellence Canada. Hope you and your family are doing well. Our last video we did a dedicated I guess it's a bit of a discussion on the
It was a love fest.
Love fest of the McIntosh C2200. And now we're going to do a comparison between the 2200 and the current version of it called the C2700. So let me just run down the specs. As a matter of fact, I think if we can do it, guys, so we'll put up graphics that show the sort of statistical differences between the two. It might be useful for viewers. So very quickly, the C2200 was made between 2001 to 2008. It sold for $5,100 at the end. It uses 412AX7s and 412AT7s. It has a moving magnet stage. And the cool thing about it is that the tubes that are used for the phono stage only come on when you switch to phono, otherwise it's off. So that extends the life of the tubes. It has 6 pairs of outputs, 3 XLRs and 3 single-endeds, 4 pairs of balance inputs, 6 pairs of RCAs, 7 if you configure MM to line, headphone output, remote control, and meters. The C2700 was released last year, 2019. It's $8,000. It has 16 inputs, 3 pairs of balanced, 4 pairs of RCAs, MM, MC, and that's a total of 9 analog inputs. Plus, it has 7 digital inputs. And I won't go through all of them. There's a lot of them. It also has home theater pass-through. And in addition to that, because it has a digital module built in, it's called the DA2. It's the latest version. It will decode up to DSD 512, 32 bits. It has 3 pairs of balanced, 3 pairs of single-ended, and 1 fixed single-ended output, say tape out. Also has headphone output, and in addition to that, it has trigger and data ports. So if you connect them to connect the preamp to other McIntosh pieces, you can turn McIntosh products, the whole system, on, off, and also when you use the McIntosh remote, you can also control other McIntosh pieces as well. It's also a dual chassis within one enclosure, so the digital section is completely separate from the analog, so there's no interference. Finally, the really cool thing about the 2700, I think it started with the 2500. I could be wrong, but I think it was. The tubes are visible from the top, and you guys might want to show and insert a picture of that. And it weighs 30 pounds.
It's not just visible from the top. What it is that there's a little chamber, and so it's actually isolated from the rest of the chassis, which is really important.
Yeah, but it's nice to, whereas with the 2200, you can't see the tubes. With the 2700, if you're standing above it, you can actually see these 6 tubes glowing. And when you turn it on, it goes through a light show, right? There's the amber, which means it's on standby, slowly warming up, and then it turns green when it's on. It's very, very cool. Anyway, Jay, why don't you start?
Oh, okay, it's me. Okay. All right.
Pressure's on, kiddo.
Okay. The C2200, we did a video on it before this video. And yeah, it was quite surprising how it matched up to the C2700. It sounded a lot more modern than I ever anticipated. And then the C2700 was actually when I played the C2200 and then switched it back to the C2700, I was very impressed. And I was mainly impressed in 2 different ways. Now, before I talk about those 2 different ways, there was a slight difference in soundstage that I noticed. It seems that the C2700 had a better, wider and deeper soundstage, and that was just right off the bat, like a little bit more sense of resolution and space, and so that was impressive. And then the 2 things that I noticed was, one was that the microdynamics and macrodynamics were a lot better on the C2700, at least to me. And this was very apparent because when I was playing tracks like by Chris Jones, or even tracks by Liberty by Anand Ashvik, the sense of the loudness, the louder instruments and the lower notes they were more evenly balanced, making everything more coherent, and that was more or less more. How do I say it? This is the thing with one take videos. My thoughts just crumble down. Was more coherent, and I don't know if you guys ever experienced this. Is when you hear a system and the whatever volume you play at, it sounds like a big hugging sound that is not only enjoyable in high volumes but low volumes as well, because those micro and macro dynamics are so well balanced. So that's one thing I noticed. And then the second thing I noticed was that there was still that mid-bass energy, but it was immensely more controlled and immensely more textured, immensely more focused than the C2200. Now, I found that the comparison, now even though I heard these differences, I found that the C2200 and the C2700 was a smaller of a difference than the video we did with the 1201 versus the 1.25. The 1201 versus the 1.25, that was like a no-brainer, like got it right away, like, it was like night and day difference. This is a little bit more subtle. So, and which one I liked better was, that's hard to say, but I think I still like the C2700 a little bit better because of that sense of bigger resolution. It's almost as if you walk into a bigger space. Yeah.
Yeah. Philip?
Ha 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 ha. Really? Okay, no, just kidding.
Go ahead.
How do I not use all the same words?
Where's the thesaurus?
Where?
Organic.
Oh, give me $1.
Huh?
Natural.
Musical.
Silky. Cotton.
How do I put this in a way that doesn't say anything close to what Jay says? Because we need to be different. All right, so
Longest pause in the world.
Here's my take on the more vintage 2200 versus the 2700. Of course, I like both, and I get to listen to the 2700 all the time. But in a previous video, I did prefer the C70 over the 2700, mostly because the C70, to me, had more of a vintage kind of tubey, warm, inviting kind of sound, which I really like. This is the reason why I gravitate towards tubes for the most part. As my ongoing education and experience in the store, I've shifted a little bit and prefer things that are a bit more neutral. More modern. I mean, that's a natural part of it. I get to hear it all the time. When you listen to the new McIntosh stuff like the 901, that's an unbelievably good amp.
Yeah.
And it has the best of both worlds in large amounts. So when you're listening to the 2200 and you listen to the 2700, what you will note is that the 2200 maintains the Mac tradition, so it has warmth, it has that kind of liquidity, it has that inviting, sound that draws you into the music, and so you get that part with the clarity and the focus and the separation of all the various musical components of a modern preamp. So you get a bit of both. The noise floor is higher, so there's not as much attention paid to keeping the background as black as possible, because the 2700 actually has a pretty black background for something that is tube bass, because generally speaking there's more noise in that system. So the McIntosh has done a very good job going from the 2200, 2300, 2500, 2600, 2700. Each iteration, the background becomes quieter, allowing better focus within the soundstage. A soundstage actually gets bigger because it's not obscured by noise that perhaps you might not hear overtly, but it's actually present in the system. So if you measure it, I'm sure if you measure it, the background, the noise floor will be much lower, and that makes a big difference. That's essentially the difference between the two units. Everything else being the same, they're remarkably similar. They do a lot of the same things. And as Jay did say, it does have way better focus. So within that soundstage, it presents itself, it's much more sorted out. It's very confident. The 2700 is very confident. You are sort of presented with the 2700 a very naturalistic and evenly presented, very smooth sounding, presentation. The presentation is very smooth, right from the very lowest bass notes, and it extends quite low, to the very highest treble notes, and there's nothing jumps out at you in terms of like there's some sort of spike in the output. It's really even, very smooth, completely easy to listen to. But at the same time, because of this character, it's not quite as quirky as the 2200. 2200 definitely says, hey, I'm a McIntosh, and this is my kind of sound, and I'm proud of this kind of presentation.
It's like your Mini Cooper.
It's like my Mini Cooper. Yes, it's not a great car for everybody, but within its envelope, it does really amazing stuff, and that's what the 2200 does. The 2700 will actually embrace all kinds of music equally well. There are no weaknesses in the design, but at the same time, it's not quite as idiosyncratic in a way that's like an uncle who's interesting, or an aunt who's interesting, right? Or grandparents who are interesting. That's how I would present
Quote,
the 2200, quote unquote.
Well, I think that the interesting thing here is that the C2700, even though, so often than not, when manufacturers try to make things cleaner, right, and try to say, oh, let's make this an upgrade, the special edition model with better capacitors, and we optimized it for
because when you put that sticker on the front, it's worth 10% more.
Well, that too, but lower noise floor and stuff like that, or their next design is to take noise away. What I find is that it doesn't become as musical, and it takes away things that makes sound leaner and lifeless and a little bit dry. What amazes me with McIntosh is that even though the C2700 has, like you said, lower background noise, more focus, more of those things, to me it's just as musical as the C2700.
Do you find? I find that 2200 has. So the word I was searching for is personality. I find it has more personality than the 2700. But at the same time, you actually notice that it has a personality, or a bigger personality.
But in a good way. In
a good way, yes.
Yeah. Unlike, say, for example, one of my earliest CJ tube preamps was a CJ, and I can't remember which model, maybe a PV2 or something. It talked about personality. This thing was full of personalities. But it was, I remember, I think it was Absolute Sound who said caramel colored sound. And this, if you think of what that means, it's got this dark, thick character sound. That's exactly what it was. It was slow, undynamic, rich, completely colored, always quote unquote musical, but also after a while uninvolving, because everything is brought into a certain compress. Sorry, I didn't mean to, but anyway, go ahead, please.
Well, but that's my experience with CJ2. I've never owned it for that reason. I always found it a little bit cloying, and even like to this day, I find it somewhat, like that's a little bit syrupy in a way that's not
a little bit, especially the earlier stuff. So that's interesting about the McIntosh, the C2200. It has its personality. That's a great way to describe it, but not so much that it puts too strong a stamp, a fingerprint onto the sound, and so everything now gets to have that personality. Too much of it. So
it's not syrupy or anything like that. Yeah.
In fact, what's interesting, I think all three of us would agree that it's really surprising that the two are even comparable.
Well,
right? They're so similar in so many ways. We're not talking about huge differences of sound. We're struggling in many ways to try and define the differences. And as the guys have pointed out, the bass bump, the high frequency rise a little bit on the C2200, so it's a bit more sparkly. The 2700, I think, is more neutral. But tonality-wise, you can tell that they're basically derived from very similar circuitry, very, very similar designers.
I wouldn't be surprised if like McIntosh introduced the C2200 like now, and they told me this was like the lower, budget model of the C2700.
Except it's not. It's built. It's built in many ways better.
I know, but let's say they came out with that kind of model now, right? Then I would believe it, because that's what it sounds like. It sounds quite modern.
Very modern, yeah.
Well, if you look at it, C2200, when I bought it, was priced at about $6,000 Canadian. So I got a really good deal from the guys there at the store I got it at. And a C2700 is like around 11, 8.
Well, the exchange is
10,
also a lot worse
yeah.
now. So that's why I was using the US
But if you look at it, it includes a DAC. So how
Yes.
much is the DAC worth?
Yeah,
$2,000?
right. Yeah.
So the price difference in 15 years is almost nothing.
Yeah, and that's why I gave out those specs. You have a lot more inputs, a lot more outputs. You have features like triggering capabilities, HDMI input for audio, so you can do audio return channel. So if you have a TV that's compatible, you can adjust the volume of the TV, turn it on and off, and so on, using the same remote control. And also, the C2700 will decode DTS and Dolby and create a proper 2-channel experience through your stereo. All of these features obviously weren't available back when the 2200 was out. So yeah, it's for its time today, it's still an incredible buy.
I will say one additional thing, which Jay didn't really touch on, but I, being the turntable guy at the store, I did plug the MT5 in both systems. Now, the original reputation of the C2200 was that the phono stage was not great. It was adequate. It was competent. And that's exactly what I heard. One of the reasons the C2300 quickly superseded it is because they did improve the phono section. And on the 2700, the 2700 has got a really competent, really nice sounding phone section. It is a big improvement. So that's also part of why, the value or the price of this is essentially, higher and is justified. It does give you more in that respect. But certainly the 2200, I was expecting the phone stage to be not as good as I found it. I found it quite decent. And if you're using a moving magnet, which that's all it is, it's more than adequate for most applications. But if you really want the best experience that McIntosh can offer in a one box solution, then the 2700 certainly is that.
Yeah, I would agree. In fact, when I guess the last time I was at a McIntosh dealership meeting a couple of years ago, McIntosh said that back then it was the C2600, which was the previous version of the 2700, was their number one selling preamp in the entire lineup, which is impressive considering it's by no means the least expensive. And it's tubes as opposed to solid state, and typically an average consumer, I would say, of high end would tend to be more comfortable buying solid state than tubes. But it's a testament to how reliable the products are that you don't have to worry about these products. But yeah, by far, and I think our experience tends to also bear that out, that the 2600 to 2700 are incredibly successful and very popular. And certainly whenever we can, we always hook them up. We like it. The other thing I should also point out is that the gentleman who was responsible for the MC275 amplifier also was persuaded to come out of retirement to help design the C2200. Oh. So again, in the earlier video, I mentioned that the McIntosh had stopped making tube preamps since, when was it? 1972. The last one they made was the C22. And so in 2001, McIntosh persuaded Sidney Corderman to come out of retirement and help design the 2200 because they wanted to have that match with, back then, what was, I think was the what was the commemorative edition amplifier? It could have been the MC275 50th anniversary. But in any case, by then, the designers at McIntosh had not design anything in tubes for a very long time. So he came in and helped them, and I think that's a wonderful testament, and it follows, I guess it sets the path for all of the new tube products that we see from McIntosh. Yeah. Any last words? I guess in this particular video, in terms of summary, you can't go wrong whether you buy the 2200 or the 2300 and so on. And if you are looking for the latest, which has the latest decoding capability, all of the inputs and outputs, the ability to rename all of the inputs and all that kind of stuff, the 2700 is the one to buy. If you are looking for something that's more affordable, try to find something that's used like a C2500, 2300, 2200, doesn't have any DACs. You won't go wrong. It's really that simple. It's just thumbs up for sure, I think.
Well, you can see it in that the used prices, which are determined by what people will actually pay, have stayed relatively consistently high.
Yeah.
I mean, here you are buying a C2200, which is still considered kind of a modern preamp. It could be almost 20 years old, and it'll still fetch significantly above 50% of the original retail price.
Yeah. Well, I think that wraps everything up. If you like this video, please subscribe, turn on the notification, like the video, share it. The funds we get from the videos, we match and we donate to the Salvation Army. So thank you very much for supporting it. I'm Adrian, Philip J, Audio Excellence Canada. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.